The gymnasium glowed with stage lights and polish. Banners and school colors draped the walls, spelling out excellence, achievement, legacy. Rows of white folding chairs stretched from wall to wall, filled with students in sharp blue gowns and gold cords, their caps tilted just enough to look rebellious in photos. Flash after flash, laughter, a sea of smiles too wide, too practiced. In the corner, almost out of sight, Walter swept the edge of the stage, slowly, carefully, not because anyone was watching, but because he always did things that way. 63 years old, white shirt tucked into faded slacks, name patch on the chest, nearly threadbare. No one spoke to him, no one saw him. He'd been there for over a decade, cleaning classrooms, fixing light bulbs, emptying trash, invisible, the way dust settles behind lives too busy to notice. A girl nearly tripped over his mop bucket, then laughed and stepped around it. "Sorry, Walter," she said without looking. He nodded silently, then resumed wiping a smudge from the edge of the stage with his sleeve. One final check before the ceremony began. The music started, that familiar, pompous march. Teachers took their seats. Students filtered into rows. Proud parents leaned forward with phones raised like shields. And just as the principal stood at the mic, tapping it awkwardly, "Hello, hello, can everyone hear me?" a man rushed up to the side of the stage and whispered something into her ear. She blinked, froze for a beat, then leaned toward the mic again. "We've just been informed. Unfortunately, our keynote speaker, Mr. Gregory Walsh, was unable to make it due to a flight delay dash." She forced a smile. "We apologize for the inconvenience dash." The crowd stirred, confused whispers, a few groans. In the second row, a boy leaned over to his friend and said too loudly, "Let the janitor do it." Laughter erupted. Walter didn't flinch. He was still on one knee near the side curtain, adjusting a fallen cord. The principal chuckled nervously, glancing at the microphone, then at the clock, then at the restless crowd. Parents were shifting in their seats. Teachers avoided eye contact. Then she looked at Walter and paused. "Actually," she said, half joking, "Walter's been here longer than most of us. Maybe he should say a few words while we reset the schedule dash." The audience laughed again, lighter this time. Walter stood up slowly. The principal hesitated, then tilted her head. "What do you say, Walter? Just a minute or two?" He met her gaze, calm, no fear, no performance. Then he nodded. "I can say a few things," he said softly. The room stilled. He stepped up to the podium, wiping his hands on his pants. A few kids chuckled again, not out of malice, but because they didn't know what else to do. A janitor at their graduation? It felt like a skit. Walter cleared his throat, glanced down at the mic, then looked out over the sea of fresh faces, hundreds of them, some curious, some amused, most indifferent. His hands shook just a little. And then he began. Walter gripped the sides of the podium like it might drift away without him. The polished wood was warm under his calloused fingers, too polished, too smooth for hands used to rusted hinges and cold mop handles. He cleared his throat again. The mic let out a tiny pop. Scattered laughter tickled the air. Row 4, row 5, whispers tucked behind cupped hands, behind phones half lowered, capturing him like a novelty. The janitor. He could hear it in their minds even if they didn't say it out loud. What could he possibly say? Walter's eyes scanned the crowd, a sea of young faces, shifting uncomfortably beneath caps they hadn't earned as much as survived, restless, waiting for this awkward detour to end. He took a shallow breath. "My name is Walter Hayes," he began, voice small, raw. "I clean the halls of this school dash." A chuckle from somewhere in the back. A few heads turned, grins shared like candy. Walter's hands tightened on the wood, not from anger, from something quieter. He had known this would happen. He looked down at his palms, still faintly gray from grease on the gym's back door. He hadn't had time to scrub them clean. Not fully. He continued anyway. "I've walked these floors for 11 years, he said. "Most of you didn't notice me. That's all right, Dash." A few more laughs, nervous this time, less sure. "I don't wear a tie. I don't teach calculus or history. I don't grade your essays, Dash." He paused. Someone whispered, "Thank God," and another student stifled a snort. Walter looked up. "I've picked up notes you dropped, homework, detention slips, love letters you never sent, Dash." The laughter faded, just a little. "I've mopped footprints after school dances, cleaned up tears in bathrooms, wiped away things you hoped no one saw, Dash." His voice cracked slightly on that last line. A few faces shifted. Still, a boy near the aisle whispered, "Is this for real?" Like it couldn't be. Walter heard it. He smiled. A slow, knowing smile that didn't rise to his eyes. "I don't speak much," he said, "not because I have nothing to say, but because I've spent a long time learning when words actually matter, Dash." Silence now, thin, uncertain. He reached into his back pocket and unfolded a worn scrap of paper. "Found this in the library 4 years ago, no name. Just a question scribbled in the margin of a book. What if I'm not enough?" He held the paper between 2 fingers. "I think about that line a lot, Dash." Someone in the back shifted in their chair. A girl's eyes welled, though she didn't know why yet. Walter looked out at them again. Hands stained, clothes plain, voice still shaking just a little. But something had shifted. Not in him, in them. And for the first time since he stepped up to the mic, they listened. Walter didn't flinch at the laughter, didn't shrink, didn't stiffen. He simply waited, let it pass through the room like a breeze, brief, forgettable. Then he folded the paper in his hands, slipped it back into his pocket with care like something sacred, and began again. "You learn a lot. Cleaning rooms people just left, Dash." His voice was quiet, but steadier now, like it came from someplace deeper than his throat. "Most days, I sweep up gum wrappers and pencil shavings, candy crumbs, but some days," he paused, "you find something more, Dash." The gym was restless, still not sure if they were meant to laugh or listen. "I've read scraps of dreams," he continued, plans scribbled on the back of torn notebook pages, auditions for bands that never formed, notes to people who never replied, Dash. His eyes swept across the room, not accusing, just seeing. "I've heard arguments echo through empty halls. I've seen kids cry in stairwells after failing a test. I've watched you grow, year by year, in the margins where no one claps, Dash." A girl in the third row shifted in her seat. I once found a paper torn into 8 pieces, shoved in a locker vent. It took me a while, but I put it back together. It was a list, not for groceries, not for college apps dash. He leaned forward just slightly. It was a list of reasons to stay alive dash. The air thickened. No one laughed now. I never told anyone. I just started leaving quotes, notes, little things on that locker door, every Monday, every week dash. He straightened up. I didn't know if it helped, until one day I saw the same handwriting in a yearbook message. Thank you for reminding me that quiet people matter dash. Walter looked down at the stage for a beat. The lights washed his face in amber. His wrinkles caught the glow like tree bark in late sunlight. I'm not saying that to impress you. I'm saying it because you don't always know when you're saving someone, and you don't always know who's saving you dash. A murmur ran through the crowd, not laughter, not whispering, just breath, human and real. In the back, someone crossed their arms tighter, a defense, a wall trying to stay up. On the left, a teacher sat straighter. On the far right, a boy who hadn't looked up all morning suddenly did. Walter paused. He had more to say, so much more. But for now, he just stood there plain, unpolished, and absolutely unshaken. Somewhere, a chair creaked. And in that moment, the room shifted. Not all at once, but enough. They still didn't know who he was, but they were beginning to understand what he was. Walter's eyes drifted upward, not to the students, not yet, but to the gym's steel rafters. They held echoes, decades of clapping, sneakers, speeches, laughter, silence, and pain. His voice came back, slower now, stronger. There was a boy, maybe 3 years ago, name's not important dash. A cough somewhere in the back, then stillness again. He used to walk the west hallway like he was carrying bricks in his backpack, always late, eyes always tired. People called him Lazy Dash. Walter's gaze swept the left section. A group of boys sat up straighter. One of them clenched his jaw like he knew that feeling. I was buffing the floors after hours once. Thought the building was empty dash. His hands mimed the slow circle of a buffer machine. The rhythm was etched into him. But I heard something, not a scream, not a shout, just a sound that doesn't come from the body. It comes from somewhere deeper dash. His voice dropped. I found him on the floor by the lockers, crying so hard it hurt to look dash. A silence fell that felt almost holy. I didn't say anything, Walter continued. I didn't ask if he was okay. I knew that would make him run dash. He paused, let the memory live there a moment. So the next morning, I wrote a line on a post-it note from a book I carried in my pocket dash. His hand touched his chest. Sometimes the people who feel like they don't belong are just ahead of their time dash. He looked up now, directly into the crowd. I stuck it to locker 117 dash. A ripple moved through the students like wind through wheat, subtle, alive. The next day it was gone, but I left another, then another dash. He gave the faintest shrug. Didn't know if it meant anything. Didn't need to dash. His voice grew firmer. But that boy started showing up on time, sitting in the front row, asking questions. Teachers thought it was tutoring. Discipline. No one guessed he was climbing out of something with nothing but threadbare words and a stranger's belief dash. He looked out now with full presence. He graduated with honors. I saw his name in the program, saw him walk that stage with his head up dash. Walter's hand, stained and worn, brushed the edge of the podium. I never spoke to him, not once. I didn't have to dash. The gym was utterly still. No shifting, no whispering. Not even the teachers whispered now. Something hung in the air, heavier than applause, louder than chatter. Respect. Real, earned, quiet as truth. Walter's voice settled, low but unshakable. I've cleaned these halls for years, and I've learned, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is believe in someone without needing them to know dash. Then he smiled, not wide, not performative, just enough to carry the weight of the moment. And for the first time, they didn't see a janitor. They saw a man who had lived more than they could imagine and said less than he ever needed to. Walter let the silence hang, not as a pause, but as punctuation, the kind that invites breath, thought. Then, softly, he began again. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength dash. He let the words linger in the space between them. A few students tilted their heads. That's Marcus Aurelius, he added, with a hint of reverence, Roman emperor, philosopher, janitor, in his own way dash. The joke was gentle, barely there, but it landed. He continued, slower now, like the speech had stopped being a performance and started being a conversation with time. It always seems impossible until it's done dash. He met their eyes again. Nelson Mandela said it long before people listened dash. The room remained hushed, not out of obligation now, out of curiosity. Something had shifted. The laughter from earlier felt far away, almost embarrassing to remember. Walter tapped his thumb against the edge of the podium. And then there's the one I carry with me the most dash. He pulled from his back pocket a small, folded card, the kind you'd find in an old drawer, weathered, frayed at the corners. The strength of a life is not measured in the hands that applaud it, but in the quiet it leaves behind when it's gone dash. His voice didn't shake this time. He looked out into the crowd, and something in his eyes flickered, memory, maybe, or grief that had been softened by time. That one, he said, holding the card between his fingers, wasn't written by a philosopher or a president or someone famous dash. He paused. A student in the second row, a boy in a too-big gown, sleeves brushing his wrists, squinted, brow furrowing. Wait, the boy said, that quote's on the stone outside, near the front gate dash. Whispers stirred. Another student turned. It's carved right under the dedication plaque. You pass it every morning dash. Walter looked up, and for the first time since he'd taken the stage, he smiled. Not faintly, not politely, but deeply. Yes, he said, it is dash. A beat of silence. Then he added, simply, he was my father dash. The gym inhaled, audible, like something unseen had just entered the room. Eyes widened, mouths parted. The stone, the quote, the building that bore a name none of them really questioned. Hayes Hall, founding headmaster, Daniel Hayes. Walter stood in its shadow every day. mopped beneath it, silently. And now they understood, not just who he was, but what he had chosen. A ripple moved through the gym like wind through tall grass, students shifting in their chairs, glancing at each other, at the teachers, at the stage. Some mouths hung open, others were tight-lipped, stunned. He wasn't joking. He wasn't just the janitor. He was the son of the man whose name was chiseled in stone out front. Walter let the silence live a moment longer. He didn't rush it. He'd learned long ago that truth, real truth, needed breath before it landed. I was supposed to take over the school, he said softly. That was the plan, Dash. His voice was calm, measured, like he wasn't telling a secret, just opening a door that had always been there. My father built this place brick by brick, not just with money, with values, with the idea that learning should create better people, not just successful ones, Dash. He glanced toward the back of the gym, where a few older faculty sat with mouths slightly parted. He wanted me to carry it forward, be the next headmaster, Hayes, Dash. He smiled faintly. I didn't want it, not at first. I wanted to build something on my own, earn my name, not just carry his Dash. He folded his hands at the podium. His fingers were thick, strong, rough. They did not tremble. So I went to Yale, double major, political science and philosophy, Dash. Murmurs again. A girl in the third row whispered, "What?" I joined the army after that, Walter continued. Served 4 tours, carried more than I want to talk about, came home with a chest full of medals, and hands that shook when I held a coffee cup, Dash. He exhaled once, deeply. I taught at 3 universities after that, lectured on ethics, leadership, purpose, but he looked up, and his voice changed, warmer, sadder. Then I met her, Dash. The room leaned forward. She taught poetry at a public high school, hated paperwork, loved thunderstorms, thought kindness was a better credential than any degree, Dash. He paused, just for her. I married her, thought I was the lucky one, Dash. A long silence. Cancer took her, fast, like a thief, Dash. He didn't flinch. He'd lived inside that sentence a long time. After that, I didn't want to be important anymore, Dash. He glanced at the polished hardwood stage beneath his feet. I didn't want stages, or spotlights, or titles, Dash. He looked up again, and this time, his eyes met theirs with something new. Conviction. So I came here, quietly. I asked the board to let me serve in a way that didn't require a desk or an office, just a key and a mop, Dash. A boy in the front row stared, jaw slack. One of the teachers had tears in her eyes. Walter smiled again, small but unwavering. Some people thought I lost everything, Dash. He tapped the side of the podium once, gently. I didn't, Dash. He leaned forward slightly. Sometimes, you learn more with a broom than with a briefcase, Dash. He let the words settle. No one laughed. No one moved. The gym was full, but it had never felt this quiet. Never this awake. They had come expecting a speech. Instead, they'd found a man who had lived every word. Walter stood quietly for a moment, watching them. All of them. Rows of students in borrowed gowns and brand new shoes. Nervous smiles that had faded into stillness. teachers who no longer fidgeted, parents leaning in, hands frozen over phone cameras, no longer filming, just listening. The silence was full now, heavy with something reverent. Walter leaned slightly into the mic. His voice was lower, gentler, but carried farther than ever before. We teach you to chase success, to stand out, to win dash. He let the words hang. But no one tells you what to do with all that winning once you get it dash. He stepped out from behind the podium, letting his fingers brush it once before leaving it behind. He walked slowly to the edge of the stage, close enough to see their faces. I've seen people with awards and applause who couldn't sleep at night. I've seen students with a wall of medals who didn't know how to look someone in the eye and say, "I'm sorry, dash." A girl in the front row wiped her cheek. A teacher held a hand over her mouth, breathing carefully. Walter's eyes were clear, not angry, not sad, just full of truth. Success isn't loud. It's not measured in trophies or test scores dash. Success is kindness in private when there's no one watching dash. Success is integrity without applause when doing the right thing feels like losing dash. He looked up toward the rafters. It's choosing purpose, even when it doesn't come with a paycheck or praise or a nameplate on a door dash. He turned to face them again. Some of you are going to change the world, but hear me now. If you forget how to love the small, the quiet, the unseen, you'll lose yourself in the noise dash. He took a breath, deep, settled. I clean these halls not because I have to, but because I believe what happens in the corners matters just as much as what happens on the stage dash. He placed a hand over his heart. And if one of you, just one, leaves here today remembering that, then everything I gave up was worth it dash. A single sob broke the silence, then another. Some students cried openly, others sat frozen, blinking fast, trying to hold it in. A boy who had laughed the loudest earlier had his head down now, hands clasped in his lap. Teachers exchanged glances, stunned. Not because the speech was beautiful, but because it was real. Not rehearsed, not polished, lived. Walter looked over the gym one last time. So many faces, so many futures, and for the first time, he was seen. Truly, and in that stillness, without applause or fanfare, he gave them the greatest graduation gift of all, a new definition of success. Walter walked slowly back to the center of the stage, no papers, no notes, just the weight of the moment cradled in his palms. He rested his hand on the podium again, looked out over the gym one last time. So many faces, so many futures. He let his voice fall to a whisper, not because it was weak, but because he wanted them to lean in and feel it. I came here to clean floors dash. A pause, a heartbeat. But in truth, I came to remind you, no one is ever just their title, not even a janitor dash. And then he stopped. No flourish, no dramatic bow, no self-importance. He simply stood there, still, open. The silence was thick, not uncomfortable now, but sacred, a kind of stillness that demanded respect. Then, from somewhere near the back, a single clap broke through. One hand, then another. A girl in the third row stood up, then a teacher, then more. It spread like fire, not fast, real, earned. Applause filled the room, No longer polite, no longer obligatory. Thunderous, standing, roaring. Caps slipped off heads, tears slipped down cheeks. Laughter returned, but it was soft now, gentle, reverent. Even the students who had rolled their eyes earlier were on their feet, some clapping with red faces, others with heads slightly bowed, the weight of shame giving way to something harder to name. Respect, gratitude, awakening. Walter didn't move. He stood in the same posture he'd used while pushing a mop bucket, his back straight, his chin steady, his hands relaxed at his sides. He didn't smile for attention. He didn't soak it in. He simply nodded once, as if to say, "You heard me, that's enough." But in the eyes of every person standing in that gym, it wasn't enough. It was everything. It was the kind of truth they would remember long after the gowns were packed away, long after the diplomas were framed and the careers began. He'd swept their floors for years, but in 10 minutes, he swept their hearts clean of everything that didn't matter. The ceremony ended, but no one left. The music played, muffled by emotion. Diplomas had been handed out, names called, but none of that mattered now, not really. What they would remember wasn't printed on parchment. It stood in work shoes at the edge of the stage, surrounded by blue robes and camera flashes. Walter tried to step down quietly, tried to slip away the way he always did, unnoticed, unbothered, but the students wouldn't let him. They gathered around him, fast, nervous, wide-eyed. Some still sniffled. Others smiled awkwardly, hands twitching at their sides as if unsure whether to hug him or salute. "Can I shake your hand?" "Sir, Mr. Hayes, I mean Walter. That was, you changed something today, Dash. Can we take a picture? Please?" Phones rose, arms draped over his shoulders. Laughter. Not mockery this time. Relief, gratitude, awe, and apologies. "I'm sorry I never said thank you, Dash. I'm sorry I called you the mop guy, Dash. I'm sorry I didn't know who you were, Dash." Walter just nodded, no judgment in his eyes, only kindness. The kind earned over decades of watching without speaking. The principal stood off to the side, arms crossed, eyes wet. She hadn't said a word since the speech. Behind her, teachers spoke in hushed tones. One of them, Mr. Callahan, a history teacher known more for sarcasm than warmth, stepped forward slowly. He cleared his throat. "You mopped my room for 6 years, he said, his voice rough, "and I didn't know, Dash." Walter turned toward him, not defensive, just open. Mr. Callahan swallowed. "You could have told us, all of us, about Yale, about the war, about who your father was, Dash." Walter's eyes softened. Then he said, simply, "Because it doesn't matter who I was. It matters what I leave behind, Dash." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was honest. Mr. Callahan nodded once, then stepped back. Students parted like water as Walter moved toward the gym's exit. No mop this time, no keys jingling on his belt, just the weight of hundreds of eyes following him with something new. Reverence. As he reached the doors, someone called out. A girl's voice, steady, clear. "What do you think you left behind, Mr. Hayes?" Walter turned. His face creased in a smile, so gentle it felt like sunrise. "I hope A little more light dash. And with that, he stepped into the hallway, quiet as always, leaving behind the echo of something unforgettable. The sun filtered through the front windows of the school like it always had, golden, warm, unbothered by seasons or generations. Students passed through the front lobby in a blur of chatter, backpacks swinging, sneakers squeaking on polished tile. But now, just to the right of the main doors, beneath the school crest, and above the honor roll plaques, there was something new. A rectangle of brushed bronze, mounted to the wall, clean, quiet, humble. Walter Hayes, servant, teacher, founder's son. No one is ever just their title dash. No spotlight. No unveiling ceremony. Just presence. And stillness. And the hush it brought. Some passed by it with curiosity, others slowed. Some students, the ones who'd been there that day, stopped completely. One girl, backpack slipping off one shoulder, touched the edge of the plaque with her fingertips, lightly, like it was sacred. Who was he? A freshman asked behind her. She looked at the plaque, let the silence stretch. A janitor, she said softly, and a lot more dash. In classrooms, students quoted his words, not because they were assigned, but because they stuck. Teachers found the atmosphere different that fall, not louder, not stricter, just more awake. Kindness bloomed where sarcasm used to live. Doors were held longer, apologies came easier. A locker number 117 always had a new post-it note taped to it now. The handwriting changed week to week, but the message was always the same. You matter. Some students went into service. Some went into business. One boy, the one who'd made the janitor joke that started it all, wrote his college entrance essay about the day he learned what leadership really meant. He got in. The school grew, as all things do. New buildings, new technology, but the plaque stayed quiet and unmoving. And every once in a while, a graduating student would rest their hand against it, just before stepping out the front doors into the world. Not for luck, for remembrance of a man who taught them without a classroom that greatness never needs to announce itself, and that the most powerful legacy is the one that outlives applause. Years passed, seasons turned over the school like quiet pages in a book. The walls were repainted, desks replaced. Students came and went in waves of youth and certainty, but the bronze plaque near the entrance never dulled. It didn't ask for attention. It simply was. And those who noticed it really noticed, left the building a little differently than they entered. One autumn afternoon, long after graduation gowns had been packed away and cafeteria trays cleared, a new student stood in front of the plaque. She was small, unsure of herself, the kind of girl who avoided eye contact and shrunk from her own shadow. She read the words twice, then 3 times. Walter Hayes, she whispered. She didn't know him, but something about those words. Servant, teacher, founder's son. They held weight. As she turned to walk away, a soft voice spoke behind her. He taught here. The girl shook her head. No, she said. He cleaned here, Dash. The other student laughed awkwardly. So why the plaque? The girl glanced back one more time, her voice quiet but steady now. Because he saw what no one else did, Dash. Walter never asked to be remembered. He didn't leave behind memoirs or medals or monuments. Just footsteps, kindness, a few whispered quotes tucked into lockers. But those who heard him that day, who really heard him, carried something more than memory. They carried a shift, a new lens, a deeper understanding of what it means to matter. He had taught them, without ever standing behind a classroom podium, that greatness isn't always loud. Wisdom doesn't come wrapped in titles, and leadership doesn't need a spotlight. It just needs someone brave enough to show up every day, even with a mob. And if anyone ever forgot that, all they had to do was pass through the front doors, where sunlight hit the plaque just right around noon, where his words waited patiently, quietly, forever. No one is ever just their title dash. And somehow, that always seemed to be enough.